Anthony, if you're watching this, welcome to episode 10 of the Pile of Shame broadcast. We are currently joined by my regular co-conspirator, Anthony, from the Grana Priego channel, and Jay from NI Miniatures, popping his Pile of Shame cherry. Evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Well,
now, we may well potentially be joined by a couple of other, interesting gentlemen, but for the rest of this evening, what we are going to be talking about, either the three of us or anybody else who cares to join us, we've got a couple of little topics that often spark a bit of discussion or controversy amongst gamers, and that is, crossing genre divides. Do you do sci-fi and fantasy or just historicals? Do you do both, or have you done one and now do the other? And then the other topic that we're probably going to start off with first, I think, is hobby top tips, or what's been a good hobby purchase of yours that's made your hobbying, gaming life easier, or a tip that makes you think, well, I used to do it this way, but try doing it that way instead, and you get the picture, I'm sure. So first of all, though, what have we all been up to lately? Let's start with you, Jay, seeing as this is your first time on the broadcast. What have you been up to lately, game-wise and hobby-wise and stuff?
well, I've just been playing ball actually at my local club. It's all I've really been doing with my German army, and I've just been beating away at my late Tudor Irish Conquest of Ireland Irish army. It's an allied Irish army. That's really all I've been doing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Would you say that you focus what you're doing and hobbying on what you're playing? Because I certainly try to do that anyway, or at least having been. I mean, that's why I'm called Bitesized Wargaming. Little bite-sized bits of loads of different stuff, really. But I certainly try to focus on what I'm actually playing these days.
Oh, I only ever play Bolt Action because the other game we play at the club is Bolt Black Powder, but only one person really plays it, so I don't run a hell that much except the AWI stuff, which is still sitting there. I'm still working away at it. But
yeah, we got quite
a
decent collection of that, haven't you? Really? Yeah. What about yourself, Anthony? You still plugging away on your French at the moment?
Still plugging away at third corps. I'm actually really close to. Actually, I finished the last battalion of French infantry today. I was working out. It's 7 months of complete hard slog, of literally line infantry after line infantry after line infantry after line infantry. 29 battalions.
Good Lord. And how many figures do you do into a battalion? Remind me.
24.
Ooh, yes, that's a few models then.
Yeah, quite a few.
I can't remember. We've had this discussion before, and I can't remember what you said. Have you stuck to a particular manufacturer, or have you varied across?
No, I vary. When I first got into it, I brought the Warlord starter set, and I was very narrow-minded at that time. That. And it wasn't until I actually discovered Perry's that I started to branch out. And obviously, once you become a bit of a NAPS veteran, then you obviously start experimenting with other companies. I suppose the ones I mainly use. I quite like the Warlord long, great coated French. They're not too bad. I'm not a big fan of Warlord normally. Perry's, Victrix, Calpe, front rank, of course. I might have delved into a few other companies as well. I think I've actually even got a couple of female Napoleonic officers heading away in a couple of my battalions. Yeah,
Lord.
There's one in the French and one in the British. One in the British battalion. Yeah.
Kate, short for Bob. Showing me age with a Blackadder joke there. What was I going to say? Now you mentioning, just before we crack on with our topics, you mentioned like the big three plastic model wise, Victrix, Warlord, and Perry. Now, Warlord and Perry, I'm quite acquainted with. Just thinking purely of Napoleonics. But how do you find Victrix size-wise? Because looking at their other ranges, things like Ancients and Dark Ages, I find they're a little bit bigger than things like Perry and Warlord.
I think their bases are a little bit thicker for starters. Sometimes that's a lot of the problem. I think also their weapons are a little bit on the thin side, so the muskets are a little bit on the thin side. But other than that, they actually amalgamate really quite well. And I've actually got battalions of like mixtures of all of them together. That they all basically all the companies I use all go really well together. And apart from slight, like I think for instance, front rank have got quite chunky muskets in comparison to like Calpe and Victrix.
Front rank have got quite chunky everything compared.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, especially with some of the really old Perry's figures, you find that they're just a little bit shorter than their more modern ones. Not enough to actually ruin the look, but you just see that it's a little bit of difference. And I sort of came across that when I picked up one of their, I guess it must be one of their really early command packs. I noticed that I think it was and also some infantry as well. The ones in greatcoats were just maybe a millimeter shorter than for instance, like an ungreatcoated French command. And they just look slightly smaller framed, so it kind of looks just like more or less like it's a shorter guy, really. So it doesn't really make too much difference on the base. It's not like, for instance, trying to stick in a 25mm Foundry figure in with your sort of 28mm Warlord or whatever. Obviously, Warlord are quite chunky as well.
Indeed.
Sometimes there's quite a big difference in a fist. When they're sort of holding their muskets, you compare that to like an elite miniature. Elites also use elites quite a fair bit.
My personal favourite. Had I been involved in the discussion last week,
strangely enough, my last battalion is practically all made up of elites.
Lovely.
Salvaged from 2 boxes. Yeah.
Fair dues. Now, as for myself, what I've been up to lately, like I mentioned, I've been making a definite effort. One of my sort of not quite a New Year's resolution, because maybe it was really, because I did a video on my channel before Christmas about what motivation keeps you hooked in and keeps you persevering with a project, rather than just putting it to one side and then forgetting about it, let it gather dust. And for me, there's that Venn diagram sweet spot of different factors all interlinking is the good rules, enjoyable rules. Can you find somebody to play against? Do you like the models? Are you interested in the fluff background here? Where that all intersects for me is the few things I've now narrowed down my collections to, so that I'm painting something because I know in a couple of weeks' time I'm going to go and have a game with it, and or I pick up a project and start it because I know there's a couple of lads down the club that play that and would happily allow me to join in once I've got an army up together or something like that. And so there's quite a few things that I've swapped to make existing collections bigger or sold off just to whatever. And there's so many different things I've collected and painted over the years, but at the moment what I've been working on, I finally finished a 2,000 point Age of Sigmar army. I used to be a big 40k player, but I've not played the current edition. I've very barely played the edition before that. I haven't played regularly since 6/7th edition. Too much rules, Blake. The fact that you rock up to a game and you need like your codex, your supplement, and that campaign book because it's got the latest rules for that new unit they released, and blah blah blah. Oh look, and an FAQ to you get the picture. And my friend,
they released another codex for it.
Yeah, exactly. And my friend Jay, not to be confused with present company, who's the manager of my local Games Workshop in Bristol, says, "Oh, Sly, don't worry about it. You don't need that. You can just." And I said, "Well, what if the other buggers you want to play against do use it?" So anyway, and here's John. Evening, John.
Hello. How are we all?
All right. So we were just doing the little round drop. I haven't done the intro and talked about the topics we got this evening. We were just doing the little round robin about what we've been up to lately, and I'm just talking about how I've been painting some Age of Sigmar stuff, and also just to you haven't asked yourself the other day, Annovarians.
Annovarians, there they are.
There they are, and this is like a light infantry. So there we go.
So there we go. Headset malfunction for a second.
Have you decided which flags you're going to use for your Hanoverians?
No, I normally go flags of war if you're going to the various companies that you can buy things from online. I'm a massive fan of theirs. I mean, I was browsing their Napoleonics range, having had loads of their medieval ones in my time. And when I was, I had this great big pile of, painted sort of semi-paint or basically British Napoleonics in need of rebasing. And I came across, I mean, here's, for example, here's one of their flags. You get to see it. It's Flags of War.
Flags of War is what I used for my my Fanions. Yeah.
What I was going to say was, as I was flicking through their online catalogue, the bloody South Essex. So I have modelled a and even complete with Prince of Wales feathers on the King's colours and the French eagle on the regimental colours.
Oh, nice.
So I have modelled one of my command groups. I base mine on 6s on 16mm by 40mm bases.
Yeah.
I've modelled one of my British command groups. I would get it out and show you, but it's up behind me in the top underneath several boxes with a rifles officer in the middle of the line infantryman.
Yep.
So I thought, oh, why not? And funnily enough, what my opponent at my club, Dan, last time I was playing Black Powder, thought it was most amusing that the first of my regiments to die was the one that was being led by Sean Bean. So, Sean Bean, it dies. There we go. So, you having just joined us, John, what have you been up to gaming-wise lately before we then all launch into our topics?
So, this week, it's all been about yellow. So, I've always wanted
the paint
to do...
rather than the Coldplay song, I
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Although I don't mind a bit of Coldplay, if I'm honest. I will just say good evening to Jay as well.
Yes.
How do you do, mate? Nice to meet you. We're mates and friends on Facebook, but I don't think we've actually ever had the opportunity to speak in the flesh, shall we say. So, yeah, it's all been yellow. So I promised I always wanted to do an Imperial Fist army. And because I've got a bit of a... Whereas you guys have sort of stayed with historicals, I think I'm probably the one who's... I do dabble with historical, but sci-fi is probably my forte. So I've always fancied doing an Imperial Fist army.
So I did 40k for years, so you're not alone. It's just that I've sort of left it to one side. Now my Games Workshopping is more fantasy these days. So anyway, sorry, I interrupt. Carry on.
That's right. So anyway, I did a couple of test bits for yellow, and like the results. So I've put together a 2,000 point list, and currently working my way through the pile of shame with that. But if I'm honest, when Primaris first came out onto the market, I was I didn't like them. I thought they were a bit, it didn't sort of sit right with me. However, I've painted a couple now, and because they're bigger, they're easier. I like them now.
They're more dynamically posed. Like, for example, the assault from the current box sets. The 9th edition box sets, they're so dynamically posed and so on. I do quite like. You see, I love 40k models. I just effing hate the game.
Yeah, I like the background and the lore and the aesthetics of the figures and bits and pieces.
Yes, same.
But to be honest, the game, every time I played it, I've always come up against power gamers who. I always think of wargaming is you should, again, same for historicals. I do exactly the same for historicals. When a commander turns up on the battlefield, he's got what he's got. He doesn't go, I think I'm going to kit all my platoon out with huge great machine guns, or they're all going to ride elephants, or they're all going to do whatever, because that's not what people do. People turn up with an idea of how they're going to engage and what they're going to use. However, when they engage with the enemy, if the enemy's brought nothing but tanks, whatever, you've got to get on with it. You've got to try and do your best with what you've got.
Yeah, you did see the Duke of Wellington stood on top of that ridge saying, "Look, you've got more men than me, and half of mine are bloody Dutch."
Yeah.
Did you?
He didn't, and that's the thing. He looked at what he got. He went, okay, so I'm going to use the ridge. That's going to give me a bit of safety from the French cannons. I quite like that, and I'm going to make the French work for their ground.
The weather helped a bit, I suppose, as well.
Well, the weather helped quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I think the last couple of people I've played, and it's been a while since I played. They just they'd literally gone through and tried to utilize every rule and I'm just thinking, well, that's not really in the spirit of the game. So yeah, I'm more of
I'd call that.
The last time I regularly played 40k, like I said, was sort of borderline 7th, 8th edition. And I used to be, I say used to be, I still technically am, even though I haven't been along to clubs since pre-COVID. A member of a club in the centre of Bristol called the Bristol Vanguard, and a little offshoot splinter group of them called themselves 40k Fun Night. And every fortnight we would meet up in a room above a pub in the centre of Bristol. Very good pub too, actually, by the name of the Old Duke. And then sort of changed venue and so on a couple of times. But basically the idea was short 800 point or 40 power level, quick pickup games of 40k, and you could play 2 or 3 games in an evening. I generally just got there early, played one game, had a chat with my mates for half an hour, and then fucked off home. But I know people that were sort of there all evening and had 2 or 3 games at a time, and good fun had by all. And if you rocked up being that guy like you just described, John, you'd be sort of forcibly ejected. But so thus the title. I mean, I think there's only one club rule: don't be a dick.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I've played those individuals that spend hours and hours and hours working.
I know that's what you mean.
You know exactly who I mean. So anyway, I've literally just looked at what so in relation to my army, I've looked at it and gone, what would look nice in a cabinet? What would look nice on a tabletop? And that's what I've gone for. I've not gone for the power game. I've literally gone for what I like and what I'm going to enjoy painting and what I will enjoy.
That's all I've ever gone for in any army I've ever collected.
That's my philosophy for especially for bolt action as well. When I was building up bolt action armies, I'd build up what I wanted in the army. I didn't bother looking at the best tanks or the best, like the classic Germans. Let's give them all those Stig 44s. The assault rifles. Let's go for loads of the heavy tanks and the sort of or the Japanese with their bamboo fighters. Cheese actions.
I saw sorry, I saw it was either, I can't remember if it was a bit of a podcast I listened to or a transcription of a podcast on a website somewhere, but basically the cheesiest army list that won was just full of these Japanese bamboo spearfighter people.
That's right, yeah.
Looking at the chat, actually, Lee, Battle Bunker HQ, evening Lee, he said, I'm with you guys on this, so I rewrote the turn sequence for 40k, and now I'm starting to write campaigns.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, good stuff. Because of now, stand by your beds, folks. We're about to be told all about the 100 Years' War.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hello, mate. How are you?
Hello,
I'm fine. How are you, gentlemen?
Very good.
We've just been we're 17 minutes in. I haven't got round to the topics yet. We've just been doing the round robin of what we've been up to lately, hobby and gaming wise, and the inevitable rambling offshoots that involves. So how about your good self, sir?
That's the best part, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, as I said, there's not much done because I moved a few days ago to a new city, a new project. So you can imagine I'm still at the hotel, trying to find an apartment, all this palaver that you have to find at the new city. So nothing much, mostly some videos in YouTube with photographs of my armies and some, there's some waiting for your narration, Simon, so I can do something.
I shall have a full short for you by the end of the weekend, mate. I've got some free
it's a
time.
Problem. Yeah, I know. I'm not in a hurry, and I'm waiting for Leon, who's delayed too much. But nothing much. Hopefully, when I settle down, I will do something. I told you I'm painting my croissant miniatures. I stop it now, so hopefully I can start again.
Those are nice, those Curacao miniatures. What ones I have seen.
Yes, I'm very impressed. They're very nice.
Good. So then, gentlemen, as we mentioned beforehand, it's the 2 topics we had this evening. Let's start with the first one, which is hobby tips and hobby tools. What hobby tip or hobby tools have made your hobbying and gaming life better? Like a tool you've brought that's revolutionized where you've done something, or just change your mind about how to do something, or some advice you would give. So, like I said, as I said before, given that it's your first time on the broadcast, Jay, how about your good self, sir?
Well, for me personally, it's the brush soap. I've got here Broken Toad's brush soap. It's one of the best things I ever got. I'm not sponsored, by the way, but I did get it for free. But anyway.
No, so I've never tried brush soap. I ought to, really, because on a related tangent, everybody's got their own favourite brands of brushes. I've settled, although I'm quite willing to be persuaded otherwise with other brands, on army painting brushes. The current I always used to use Games Workshop ones because that was the high street that I used to walk into, shop sort of thing. But the current generation of Games Workshop brushes can kiss my chuddies. And they're rubbish. They're dreadful.
Are they all synthetic, the new ones?
I don't know, mate, but I'll tell you what they are, and that's shit. But sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
I haven't used Games Workshop brushes for a long time.
I'm intrigued, Jake. So can you sort of, because I've never used brush soap.
Neither have I. So brush soap 101, Jay, go for it.
Well, this is the more premium brand, but it's very good. I had a cheaper version of it, and it wasn't as good. But this one just cleans the brush completely. Like, if there's any like paint particles that just have dried up in your brush, it will clean it out fully. And that's what I quite like about this. I had a more dull version of that didn't really work that well, and it would just leave half the paint still there, and it would just stink of lemon. But this was actually pretty good. It actually does
Yeah,
what it
I've got to admit, I've been using brush soap for probably about 5 or 6 years now. And
Give us your favourites. How do you apply it?
I was going to ask the same question.
You basically just, so when you wash your brush out, this is what I do anyway. So when I wash my brush out after I've finished painting, now you don't have to do it every time you use it, but I think they recommend doing it when you've sort of finished painting, don't they? Sometimes I do it in the middle of painting, especially because they always say try not to get paint up into the top of the brush, don't they?
Yeah.
So if that happens by accident, then I'll basically wash the brush out, and then I'll use brush soap to help clear it out. But basically, you just wet your brush, so clean it out, and then instead of drying it off, just put it straight into your soap pot, and then build up a bit of a lather, and then
like an old-fashioned shaving.
I sort of clean it off on my, use my hand and my fingers to sort of work it into the brush hairs, and then sort of wipe it off onto a kitchen towel or something, or a cloth, and then sort of give it a rinse, and then have a look at it, and if it needs another go, just stuff it back in again.
Wow,
stuff lasts ages. I mean, I've been using this one, which I think a lot of people use actually.
Yeah, I've got my local club's got that. That's also a shop.
Right,
They've got some of that in stock.
This stuff lasts ages. I think my first one lasted me about 3.5 years.
Really?
And this one is still practically full.
Now, that was going to be my next question. What's it like? Is it like solid, like a bar of soap?
It's solid, yeah. It's kind of like it's try and get there you go. So it's solid and dry, and it kind of feels like soap, really. And obviously you can see like the pot mark from where the brushes sort of make an indentation. And yeah, it's like you just literally just wet your brush, give it a good lather. And then, like I say, sometimes you can work it into the palm of your hand, or sometimes you can use your fingers, and then just wipe it off onto some kitchen towel, and then give it another rinse. Or you can leave the brush soap on it, and it'll help your brush keep its tip.
For those brush soapers amongst you, then, does it make any difference the sort of paint you use? Like, for example, that old bastard Don McHugh, if he's listening, I don't know where you live, son. But is it? He loves me telling him he's old school. But bless him, he uses Humbrol paints, and he's too dyed-in-the-wool
enamels. I don't know.
It's changed.
I'd imagine it probably would, because it's kind of it's a brush conditioner as well. So, I mean, I've used it. I mean, I've got a particular Vallejo paint, which is that liquid gold. I've actually found out that you're supposed to clean your brush out in alcohol when you use this.
Oh, really?
But I've actually been getting by using my brush soap. But I have actually got some. I did actually pick up some IPA, and it does clean it out a lot easier. But then I do tend to. After I've cleaned it off and washed it, I just give it another quick go in the old soap, the brush soap as well.
Fair enough.
So
every day's a school day. So
I was going to say, as a shameless plug, Jay, which brand would you? Because obviously you're using a brand. I'm quite intrigued with this now because I am. I tend to kill brushes like. Well, they come to my house to die.
I kill Games Workshop brushes. I know that one.
Right, yeah, and army painted ones. I've got a few army painters. My favorite. So what would you recommend? What would be your brand of choice?
No pressure.
Broken Toad's the best one because I was given to this for free.
What brand is that, mate?
Broken Toad. They make the
Broken
road
Toad, okay.
Yeah. No, I've heard of
This
that.
one is the original B&J.
I think I've used that one before, and I
Yeah.
made a
I
review
recognise
of
the
it.
label, the thing. Yeah.
It's not very expensive. It's only about, I think when I bought, I don't know, they've probably gone up now, but I think it was about £3.50 when I originally got this, and that was, like I say, the first one. This is the second one I've had, and the first one lasted me ages. It lasted me like I say, about 3.5-4 years.
Because
Because
because Battle Bunker sort of said it does help keep the life of the brush. So I'm thinking by investing maybe a couple of quid on one of these brush soaps, it may mean that I may have to maybe not buy. I mean, a brush will probably last me 2-3 months, I reckon.
Yeah.
And then I tend to, because I do all sorts with the brush. I mean, I dry brush, I do all sorts. So I'm not. I'll probably use the character brush, the detail brush, and the regiment brush. They're probably the three that I use. But yeah, so if that brush soap, that's a that's
top tip. Thank you, guys.
It'll definitely extend the life of your brush, but obviously it depends on how rough you are with your brushes. But I'm sure you'll probably get an extra month or two out of it, for sure, I reckon.
Right, we'll carry on the round robin, and perhaps we'll keep going round until we've all run out of ideas on this particular topic. Going clockwise on my little thing I can see in front of me. John, you're next.
Oh wow! It's actually what's revolutionised painting for me over the last month is something that I had on one of the first podcasts that I joined, which is the magnifying glass. The light, because I find that with my eyesight that it's not as good as it used to be, and I do.
Age,
that will be my age. And what I found is I've did a comparison of models pre-magnifying glass and after magnifying glass, and what I've found is that I've actually managed to stay within the lines, which is good. So when I've done my colouring, it's not gone over. So to be honest, the quality that I've been able to put into my figures has been a lot higher than I've been able to do for a number of years, mainly because of the eyes going. But to be honest, I think I paid £19 off Amazon for this, and you get four lenses, and so you can have it pretty much like milk bottle glasses. So you can, it's there. I've gone for the least magnification with my reading glasses. It's absolutely brilliant, and I sort of forget occasionally that I've still got them on, and I'm walking around the house like some sort of Call of Duty special ops guy, and then wonder why I bang into stuff because everything's magnified. But that would be my if gamers or painters of a certain age, and who are struggling with painting. Especially some of the fiddly bits. I mean, historical gamers, you've got your sashes and bits and pieces. Do you know?
Bloody Prussians! Jay and I did a model swap a few months ago, and he sent me some Prussians that he had started, but wasn't interested in carrying on with. So I gratefully received them, allies of my Brits, and all the cross belts and things on a freaking Prussian.
So that would be my tip, Simon. If to get the magnifying
on an offshoot related to that, a daft tradition we have at Christmas that we actually inherited from my sister-in-law when she was with us one Christmas is have almost like a doll's house type thing made out of cardboard with the sort of streamer ribbon type things that you quite often use to embellish a bit of present wrapping and so on. Like loads of them coming out of this box. At the other end of them is like a random crappy gift, bit like the sort of crappy gifts you put in kids pass the parcel things. You each go around, pull out, oh look, I got this, and I got this, and keep going around until they've all gone, and then a frantic round of trading ensues. Like, well, that packet of wet wipes, I'll swap you for this eyeliner, and things like this. But something that cropped up in last Christmas's effort was that you rock up to like a pound shop and you can see these off the shelf reading glasses, like a couple of quid. Here's a pair of them. These are my own reading, sitting using the computer glasses. But these, I couldn't really. You are now all blurred, but fuck me, something that I hold in front of me like that is perfect. So I'm off to be seen like this and then swapping over of an evening. And in fact, my daughter took a Snapchat picture of me the other day and sent it to a mutual friend of mine, saying, "Look at this bloke, doesn't he look like a twat?" Because I had these 2 pairs of glasses perched on my head like this. And look, one's for painting, all right. Yes, I did try one of those headset things that you mentioned, but I found it really uncomfortable. And my friend, a friend of mine locally, he who swore by it, and it was him I got the idea from, was like, "What?" Well, I said, "No, I didn't like it. Chucks it out. Mid-range, misery, old curmudgeon, blah blah blah." But you know, maybe I'll give it another go sometime. But I'm certainly liking my cheap random Christmas gift crappy glasses. Right. What about you, Nick? You got any particular hobbying tips for the top or tools that have made your gaming or hobbying life better?
It's a difficult one. Not about brushes or painting. For me, actually, you know, I was looking for a good terrain. I recently fought a battle and I had some compliments about the terrain.
Certainly doesn't have to be brushes or paint, so you know, go for it.
Yeah. So I was looking for a good terrain. You know, looking at all this, actually, there are some amazing new battle mats that, in comparison to the ones we used to buy 5-6 years ago, they're quite expensive, but they're really beautiful. But what I did, I was on a DIY shop in Athens when I was on vacation for Christmas, and I saw some fake plastic grass. Extremely cheap. You know, the rolls that you put in the backyard or something. So I said, why not? It was extremely cheap. It was, you know, big, extremely cheap. And I got it and I started cutting it and I used it as terrain and it looked amazing, better than any battle map. I just put it there and I got so many compliments. When did you find the battle map? Well, I said I didn't find it. It's just grass. I cut it a bit. I put some highlights on, some yellow, some whatever, and it looked amazing. And I paid what, like, you know, 4 or 5 euro for 10, 15 pieces. And I put it there and it worked really well. So, yeah.
Similar tip, actually. You know, obviously David Imrie's lovely models, not only are Claymore Castings beautiful models anyway, but he paints them particularly nicely on the Claymore Castings Wargames Rules group and so on Facebook. You know how that lovely terrain he generally takes photos of his models on, Nick? The mats that he does, I remember asking, I said, "David, where'd you get those mats? They're really nice." And they were actually directed me to an eBay listing, and they weren't actually, much like what you've just described, they weren't battle mats. They were it was something that people use to make, like, it's, say you live in a high-rise flat and you want a bit of greenery on your balcony or something like that. It's almost like a, you know, a tablecloth. Yeah, it's almost like an artificial turf, but really like closely thing, almost like a cricket square. It's that closely cropped, you know. And I forget how much it was, but it was significantly cheaper than like a proper battle mat. And I've got a couple on my eBay watched items at the moment. And when I get around to sort of investing a little more in any home terrain, I might well look in that direction. But now that I'm gaming more regularly at a club where there's loads of tables and space and terrain to game at, then I'm a bit spoiled for that regard. So I won't bother. But yeah, cracking idea, mate. That's good. Now, going round and round the on my little screen in front of me here, it makes me next. So what would I say? I'm going to cheat and use something that I've seen other people do tips for, but I'll use it here. Complete plagiarism. For dry brushing, makeup brushes.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one before. Yeah,
really soft brushes. You know, oh lovely, you know, just put my eyeshadow on, whatever. But they're brilliant for dry brushing. If you like you've got anything with a textured surface, like a base of a model, or I don't know, some sort of animal skin, or you're painting Vikings with their furs and cloaks and things, something like that. You know, brilliant. Couldn't say. I mean, that's it. That's not an exactly lengthy tip there, but it's certainly one that I've discovered relatively recently, and would swear by.
And to be honest, you get a really nice finish with the makeup brush. I bought some at Christmas that were cheap in one of the Woolworths type shops.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think I paid £2.99 for about 6 brushes, and they are absolutely superb for dry brush, and you can get some quite nice big ones. My only complaint is they don't fit in the dry brush pots.
I know what you mean. Now, just to interrupt, you see the eccentric man, Ken, bless him, he's put on the chat, nail varnish racks, perspex, holds 72 Vallejo paints for only £8. Well, way ahead of you, dude.
Boom. I just keep my paints in boxes.
Yeah. But no, that's I've got two. I did have three, but it took up so much space on my desk with there's so much other shit all over it anyway. And the third one was only ever about half full, so I've relegated the paints that I don't use as often, especially now I don't do as much 40k.
Yeah, that's what I've done. Yeah,
to a drawer, and then all my Vallejos plus all my contrasts and the other Games Workshop or acrylic stuff that I use. I've got a couple of Foundries paints there as well around on those nail varnish strokes. So yeah, good tip on certainly one that, as you could see, I've already taken on board. So here we go, Anthony. What about you, sir?
Well, I mean, I actually find it quite useful. I don't know if other people would, but I always keep some flat-nosed pliers around. Now, they're not particularly useful for painting, but they're extremely useful for, like, when you buy a packet of Elite miniatures, particularly, you know that a lot of the time they're terrible at standing up because of their little stubby bases. And a lot of the time you can use these to take a firm hold of the base and actually just slightly bend the figure straight, and so that the guy stands up. And also for converting figures, so for instance, if a guy's got his arm up in the air, then you can bend it right the way down and then bend the elbow up using flat nose pliers, and you've got a completely different, even though it's the same figure as you might have used 2 or 3 times before, it's in a different position.
Yeah, I've got a couple of that, and if you ally that with a soldering iron or a brief dab of a soldering iron at an elbow or thing joint, and definitely. Jay, back to you.
Easy way, rather than actually just like razor sawing off and trying to re-angle the arm or whatever.
Indeed. So Jay, back to you. Oh, he's upside down.
Upside down.
Live from Australia. Live Belfast.
Well, forgot the paint now. Well, I was going to say Foundry paints. They're actually quite good for just painting up in layers when you start. Because that's what I do.
They sell them in like triples, don't they? Really?
Yeah.
The shade, the highlight, and the middle bit.
So
I've got a few myself.
Yeah, I've got their triumvirate for British redcoats, although I generally speaking use the Blood Angels red contrast.
Funnily enough, I've got the French blue equivalent.
You are upside down, Jay, on my feed.
Yeah, I know. It's intentional.
He's just being different.
Just showing off again.
Doing OBS there.
Fair enough, sir. Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good tip. What about now? We're back round to you, John. You got any more tips?
So tip wise, so I don't know what you guys use for a palette. I mean, I've not tried a wet palette. But I use a
not convinced, to be honest.
That's what I use for a palette.
A white tile. I either use a white tile, or I've recently found that in Hobbycraft, there's a little person.
I have used a tile in the past.
Hobbycraft. They've got a very good plasticky type palette that I found again is run it under hot water, the paint lifts off, and you're ready to go again, which is really quite good. So yeah, I mean, I know there are lots of palettes on the market. I've never used a wet palette. I don't know if any of you guys have.
I never got on with that. I've tried one. Fair enough, it wasn't a particularly good one. It was basically like a normal artist's one. And it didn't have a very good cover, so it would dry up overnight if you're using it. And the other thing it wasn't really good at was actually it would over wet your paint quite easily without we're not talking about it being overfilled with water. We're just talking about it in general. I don't know if it was designed for thicker artist acrylic paints and not so much for sort of like our slightly better modeling acrylics or whatever. I mean, that's probably the reason, but I never got on with it. I found it was quite big. It was clunky. It took up too much room on the desk, and if the paint wasn't watery, then it would literally just dry up by the next day. Anyway,
I noticed on the sort of supply stand next to like the desk where the proprietor Jim sits at my local games club / shop. as well as all the army painter bits and pieces, because army painter do a wet palette now, and as well as like there it is, there's the wet palette, and there's like refill things for it. And I put wet palettes simply because one of those, frightened to change, I'm getting old and set anyway sort of thing. I put that on the same strata of mythicalness as airbrushes. I'm scared shitless. I'm sure I'd love it once I got to try it. I don't know. Jury's out for me. But yeah, there we go. That palette like that one you sort of wafted around there. Now, I used to have one similar to that, and because I generally use acrylic paint, and you know what, like acrylic paint or PVA glues, like when you peel it off in it's strangely satisfying peeling that out.
Yeah, I mean I clean. I mean practically every time I do a day's painting, I normally clean it off, and I just use one of these tools here, which is a Tamiya paint stirrer, and I actually just use this end to like scrape the paint off.
I'm not entirely certain what this thing is. It's like I think it's wooden, but it's got like a shiny, almost tile-like surface. I don't know where I got it from. I think it might have been the bottom of a box that lifted out or something like that. But anyway, it's on one side is sort of a daughter's painting effort.
I did used to use a tile a long time ago, and it's perfectly good. I just used to get fed up of having to keep clean. I found it difficult to clean. Where this like the plasticky ones is quite easy to clean, but
yeah, I every now and again I'll have a little scrape with a tool similar to that one you did. I was in a meeting with a colleague the other day, and we're chatting away, and what's that noise? And I was absent-mindedly scraping the palette with this just to clean off a little corner of it. Sorry, it's me. Excuse me. But dear me. Yeah, no, that's interesting thing. How about you, Nick? You got any more top tips for hobbying purchases and things that made your gaming life easier? Oh, he's on there. I'll tell you what, whilst he's having a think, I'll skip back round to me, because I was actually preparing. Here's one I made earlier. The lovable pin vise. We've all got one, or probably all use one, especially when you're doing like, pinning to, join new arms to old bodies, etc., etc. Or if like you buy, certainly as a devotee of Claymore castings, how many of us have had to drill holes through hands so you can put a spear in?
Yeah.
So David Imrie gave me this tip: electric pin vise.
Yeah, I actually got a Dremel. That's what I put.
Yes, very similar, and you can get drill bits.
Very similar. Yeah. I think I have actually got a pin vise. The main reason I brought it was because it came with loads of drill bits. This is the one. This is the one here. It was really cheap on Amazon. It was like $7.99 or something like that, and it comes with a really good box of drill bits.
Well, this was only cheap. This is only like, I think this is less than a tenner as well. But that lamp that I showed you earlier on, when we were talking about lamps just before we got started, it's got a USB power socket on it, which I plug
I've got the same one. Yeah,
my phone charger into it. But every now and again, when I'm doing a bit of a model drilling, there we are. Threaten my daughter with a trip to the dentist.
Oh yeah, it's got USB connector. Yeah, that's quite handy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. That would be certainly a top tip from yours truly. I think it's well, I suppose it depends how valuable a tip it is. I mean, a Dremel's probably a more useful round.
Dremel's very handy. Yeah, you use it for all sorts of stuff: sanding, cutting, drilling.
Now, mentioning Space Marines, like we were doing earlier on, John, when you were talking, do you remember that set they did years ago? It's like if you collected like however many silver skulls or something, they did that set where it was like an Ultramarine standard bearer in a very epic pose with his hands closed around a flag, sort of bunching it in, and he had like a sort of laurel wreath type head. It was one of those limited editions. Now, a friend of mine loved that, but didn't collect Ultramarines. So he brought it, he saw it on eBay, and then he used his Dremel to sand down all the Ultramarine symbols, which was a real labour of love because it's all over that bucket. It really is.
It is.
And it ended life as a blood angel, I believe. But yes, they're certainly very useful tools. But in terms of how useful that little electric pin vise, which I think $7.99 is the figure that sticks in my head. It was cheap as chips one, really. I ought to get a better one. But Jay's disappeared.
Oh, that's Jay. Yeah.
But anyway, but if he's back, he'll be back. But I suppose it depends on what armies you use. I mean, I've been furiously painting Napoleonics recently, not because it's the love of my wargaming life. I like them a lot, but it's because I've got a game on the horizon. I practice one to get me and a couple of other people who haven't played very regularly over the last year or so back used to familiar with the rules. I used to play Black Powder a lot, and I've only started playing it again recently. Because on Easter Monday, so a fortnight away, we've got a big game at the club with like 3 or 4 players per side, and something like sort of 10 foot by 6 foot of table sort of thing. So,
well,
one of the benefits of Neopolionics, I will say, is you haven't got to duel the barrels.
Yes, there is that. That's very true. But I digressed and didn't go on to actually say was that yes, I've been painting a lot of Napoleonics lately because I've got this game on the horizon. But ancients or dark ages, particularly latter and medieval stuff, is never very far away from my painting table. And so consequently, I'm always drilling holes for freaking spears. That's it's always the way.
When I was doing my saga armies, the gripping beasts used to have to drill the hands out for.
It's like the older gripping beast website is a bloody confusing bastard. You can go, hang on, that's shit, where am I? It's as speaking as an IT professional, I would say it's a bit shit, but it's not the most intuitive to use. But what I was going to say was their figures are marvelous, and they're going back a ways when they were first getting going. I've had quite a few of their things. I've had their Carthaginians and their Normans in my time. They're very nice models.
Yeah,
they're
definitely.
all range. Yeah, not the most detailed.
No, I agree with that. I think actually all my saga armies have all had gripping beast starter set as their basis.
But I mean, what I mean is that they may not be the most detailed, but they do a good range.
They're definitely good figures.
Posed,
yeah, definitely.
But the things like, say, for example, comparing like the facial features of a gripping beast model compared to, say, a Claymore Castings one, thinking purely of like a face, for example, where you can literally see like crow's feet behind the eyes and like the wry smile on somebody's face, as opposed to it's eyes, nose, and a mouth.
I suppose the other thing with gripping beast is that they've got quite a lack of different poses for figures. A classic being when I built my Mutawaya army. I basically built like an 11 or 12 point Mutawaya army using nothing but gripping beast figures. And the amount of copies of the same packs I got were just beyond belief. I think I've just about got a copy of every pack that I had, some multiple times.
Gripping beast plastic Norman.
Yeah, so I think I basically basically got like a Viking, Anglo-Saxon, Irish, and Mutawaya, and I've actually got a Milites Christi in my mountain, a complete 11-point Milites Christi army, but just sitting in my mountain at the moment.
No, and Jay's back again. What happened to you, sir? Did your camera upside down go wrong?
No, I think internet just died briefly for a minute, and Facebook wouldn't load, and then I was trying to get back in here desperately.
Yes, so that's kind of reminder us. Plastic broom bristles for spears. Absolutely, sir. Let's have a quick look at the chat before we crack on. Oh, yeah. Done that trick. Done that trick. And yep, done that trick as well. Marvelous. And yes, we know. So we've gone around the house a couple of times. Has anybody else got any like top hobby this makes your life easier tips? Buy one of these?
No, not really. I can't think of anything. I've bought and gone, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Contrast paint.
Yeah. I suppose you could bring an airbrush up, but of course they have got their pluses and their minuses.
The things that worry me about airbrush is that, yes, it's expensive. I can't really afford it at the moment. But what would worry me, even if somebody says, here's some money, Simon, go and buy an airbrush. Oh, yeah, cool. It's like cleaning it out afterwards and the maintenance of it. And you spent the money on it. And it's clearly, when you see it in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing, my God, it's fantastic. And there's a chap I used to work with, probably coming to work at 9 to 5 was his secondary things. The amount of money he used to charge for some of his painting commissions was astronomical, really, and it deservedly so, because when you looked at his models, it's like, whoa. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, lovely tool, brilliant in the hands of a master, but it would scare me shitless because of would I bugger it up by incorrect maintenance?
Well, I mean, obviously the best thing when you first start out, you don't want to go and buy yourself a £200 or £300 airbrush.
Well, clearly not.
But what I do recommend is that if you do decide to ever get one, then I'll get the starter Iwata one, which is this Neo.
Yeah. You're not the first person.
I mean, it's still pretty expensive in comparison to like the cheaper Chinese ones. I think it's about sort of £70 or £80. I think it was £70 when I bought it. It's probably about 80 now, I'd imagine. But it's perfect for undercoating, for doing camouflage. All the basic things like
plasma glows on weapons for the 40k players.
Exactly. Yeah. Doing Zenithal highlights and stuff like that. You can do with it. Well, I mean, I painted my when I was doing my US Army Team Yankee desert scheme on my vehicles. I used the airbrush for putting the undercoat on and for actually spraying the vehicle desert as well.
Cool.
And it's perfect for that.
Yeah, lovely. So
they've got their uses, but for you do have to build up a little bit of confidence about cleaning them. Yeah.
There's been a bit of debate on my hobby club shop, whatever you want to call it, Discord recently regarding airbrushes, and I've got one. What happens because I'm getting this issue with it? Blah blah blah. And there's a couple of people recommend like a water trap thing for moisture build-up and stuff like that. It sounds like
I've actually got
you can keep adding to and
my compressor. Yeah. It's like a filter. And it does build up. It does actually build up moisture, and it does actually capture moisture. But I think the number one problem with airbrushes is controlling the stream of air and the paint. I mean, it's quite difficult when you first start because there's so much out there. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack for what you particularly want to do. But I've slowly got to the point where I can actually quite easily control. I mean, the secret that I learned was that when you're spraying paint, when I used to do it, you'd hold down because it's a 2-stage trigger. So when you push it down, it starts blowing air basically, and when you push it forward, it starts blowing paint. And most beginners probably do the same sort of thing, but you go and you spray your model, and then you immediately just let go of the button. And what that actually does is actually splurts paint out, so it gives you like a bad paint job basically.
So you need to pull the thing back before they let me go.
The secret is to, instead of letting go of the button, is to actually put it back to just releasing air again, and you get a smooth finish. And obviously, when I was an airbrush noob, and it's just common sense that you just let go of the button. But
it's certainly a skill or a thing, a capability which I had.
Yeah.
Because you see people knocking out incredible results really quickly.
Definitely.
Yes, with a bit of work and application, you can get similar results with a brush. But sometimes you see these people who've got
some of these people that actually paint figures with airbrushes. I really don't know how they got the patience to keep cleaning them.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, it's some people have obviously practice, isn't it? I mean, first time I ever picked up a paintbrush, I was utterly dreadful. Now I'm just sort of marginally awful. So there's a slight improvement. There we go. So now the other topic we had, unless anybody else has got any particular sort of hobby topic tips that champing at the bit to let us all know about. The other topic we had is like crossing a genre divide. Do you do sci-fi and fantasy? Do you do historicals? Do you do both, or have you done one and now do the other? And what made you change your mind if you did? So, John, you've mentioned 40k a bit tonight. but you do both, don't you? I mean, it's what drives you to be more interested in one than the other, or do you do both, or do you just do the one?
I do a bit of all really. So I started with 40k.
Yeah.
Like most people do, if I'm honest.
Do you think the reason for that? Sorry to interrupt. Do you think the reason for that is because they are such a big high street presence?
Yeah.
Most people in sort of most areas in the UK can sort of rock up to their local town, and there's a Warhammer shop, and they can just walk into it and pick up a Space Marine off the shelf or something.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
I at the time I was working in London and Kingston. There was the Warhammer shop that was on the walk down to work, and one evening it was coming up to like darker evenings, and I said to my now wife, I said, well, you know, I was going to pop in and have a look, and I did, and I was hooked. I like the background of it, but that's not but that's not to say that I don't like other genres as well, and I think that's that. So I like fantasy, I like science fiction, I like historicals, ancients, various different scales. I think my personal thing is I paint what I'm in the mood for. I get an idea, I get a concept in my head, if you like. It's something I might think of. So, for example, what I'm doing at the moment, I've got a bit of a backstory behind it, a bit of fluff, and that will sort of give me the motivation, if you like, to paint those units and to get them done.
Yeah.
But the problem I find, I don't know about you guys, how you find this, and I think it's mainly with the science fiction genre, but it probably would fall into historical as well, is you might suddenly think about something else which is cool, and then you go off and you're off at a tangent, and it's almost like that squirrel appears, and squirrel, and off you go. And before you know it, yeah, absolutely. And that project that you've sort of been planning, and you've bought, and you've started to paint a couple of units, and suddenly, just like Jay's Hanoverians, or sorry, Jay's Prussians, they suddenly don't feel that interesting anymore. And then so I'm hoping that I can sort of stay focused with this army and sort of and finish off. I mean, like, I've got a load of orcs as well, which if I ever finish them, it will be a miracle. But the thing is, I think with genres, I've got different. So I like Star Wars, I like Star Trek. Whether you can have the same have the same like in the head, I don't know. But so to me, the genre is I dip in and out. I know Nick with Nick sort of his sort of enjoyment is medieval, and he immerses himself in the medieval, not only the way that battles were fought, but the way that people lived and
the history
in the history. So, you know, to have one focus and to be completely immersed in it for me would be really good, because it would probably save me a load of money, but also I think I'd have something to show for it at the end, rather than lots of different little bits and pieces. So I think if I had to choose my top genre, it would be sci-fi, probably then historicals with Neopolionics. I'd then probably go ancients and then fantasy, if I'm honest.
Fair dues. Yeah, no, you can divide. Speaking personally, I can divide my wargaming life up into 3 distinct chunks. First, brought myself a small kid playing with toy soldiers isn't one of them. That's just what a lot of small boys do. But when I was a sixth former, I brought myself my first copy of Wargames Illustrated, and started getting really interested in sort of proper toy soldiers. And then when I went away to university down to London, there was actually bricks and mortar shops. We're talking sort of autumn 1989, and there was like bricks and mortar shops I could walk into and buy some Essex 15mm 7 Years War models, or some SHQ or MLR 20mm World War II stuff, or anything like that, as opposed to just seeing an advert in the back of a magazine pre-internet and going, oh yeah, I'll have to send off for their catalogue and blah blah blah, or ordering off the basis of a advert in a copy of War Games Illustrated or something. So basically, I had that there available to me. Came back to Bristol post university and brief stint in the army, and only high street presence was Games Workshop, plus a model shop that had all the usual array of plastic kits, and they had some 15mm minifigs in the corner, you know. But that was about it. So that's why I then drifted into both buying and playing Games Workshop stuff, and sort of left my historical wargamer life behind when I was in my mid-20s. But I've come back the other way now, back onto historicals mostly, with a brief sprinkling of fantasy. And I was explaining earlier on how, you know, the 40k bug has truly left my system. I think in terms of playing, it was the game I played to almost the exclusion of every other game in terms of actually rolling dice rather than collecting and painting models for quite some time. But now I just rules bloat and things like that. It just doesn't float my boat. Love the models, love the background and fluff. I've got quite a few sort of Warhammer 40k based novels that I've had enjoyed a read of and what have you. You know, it's good fun. But the only Games Workshop game I play these days is Age of Sigmar. It's a lot simpler as rule systems go, and I'm all about simple rules and having fun rather than is that an accurate representation of how far an infantryman could fight fire or do whatever, you know. So yeah, if for me it's historicals first, because history was always my favorite subject at school. And you can, you know, find out, or you actually learn something about, like, so I mean, I always liked medieval stuff, but since being tempted to try Wars of the Roses, which was a period of history I was always fascinated by, it's, you know, it's a very, it grabs me. It's like, whoa, yeah, this is great. This is the history of it. The models look cool. The games are good fun, depending on the rules system you use. So for me, yes, historicals first, and Dark Ages stroke medieval, followed closely by World War II and Napoleonics, and honorable mention to Age of Sigmar, because I've shelved or sold a lot of projects that I'm no longer doing, no longer gaming, because I want to focus what I'm painting as to what I'm gaming. The only exception to that, i.e. something I'm keeping hold of and may well and hope to play it, is something that was one of my first loves of gaming, and that's 20mm World War II with rapid fire. And I've got quite a bit of stuff for that that's ready and waiting to be reactivated when I get around to starting to play it again. But no, for me, the debate is I've done both. I've started one, gone across to the dark side, and then come back. And I have an enduring affection for all of it. But in terms of what I continue to persevere with, it's most definitely historicals. Oh, and Nick's back after having left us temporarily. So now I think I know what the answer might be to this, sir. But we were just talking about, you know, whether you do the sci-fi or fantasy or historicals, and if so, which periods. But I think I know what you're going to say when I say, what about you, Nick?
Good. Well, the biggest jump I did from a genre was from early 100 Years' War to late 100 Years' War, basically.
That's just 30 years down the road.
Quality.
No, the truth is that I started gaming, like most of us, Warhammer 40k, and then I went to historicals. If I had time, I wouldn't mind going back with the new miniatures and, you know, painting, you know, with painting 20, 30 models per side, you can have a decent battle and enjoy, you know, and so it could be, yeah, I could. I mean, if I find the time, I could invest in, I don't know how the game works now, but I can imagine, you know, 30 miniatures per side with a couple of vehicles and dreadnoughts can make the battle a decent battle. So yeah, I could.
Don't forget the 3 rules to take with you.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. But anyway, Warhammer 40k reminds me of medieval. You know, it's a bit medieval. It looks like a futuristic medieval battle. So yeah, sure, I could jump to this one, but you need a bit of time for this, and not currently, but maybe in the future. Yeah, I like the miniatures a lot.
I have to say that so many people say what you've just said, Nick, and other people like, you know, I started with Warhammer and then found historicals. I feel weird being the other way around. you know, yes, I'm now back with historicals, but that was my first ever. And oh, look, I'm now back living in my hometown, and the only models I can grab on the high street easily are these Space Marines and fancy orcs and things. But it almost makes me feel like, not like a leper, but just odd. You know, all these people say, "Oh, I start with 40K." And what do you mean?
But that's how it is for us. I mean, when I came to, I think we had the discussion last week. You know, when I came to UK and wargaming was not. I mean, it was difficult we didn't have internet, we didn't have anything at those times, you know, we didn't have anywhere to know that there were SX miniatures or Claymore miniatures or whatever. My first miniature thing I saw was Warhammer, the Games Workshop in Oxford Street, you know. That was the first thing I saw. Yeah, it was. I don't know if it is there anymore. It was in the
around the corner of Tottenham Court Road now, I believe.
Yeah, in the middle 90s. So, yeah, I mean, I went inside and I was impressed, and I think we discussed this last week. I was really impressed, and the first thing you saw was Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. So that was my first. The first miniatures I saw, you know, they present them nicely. They have beautiful terrain. They paint them extremely well. You see them, you're impressed. You buy them, you paint them, and they look crap. But that's it, you know. That was my first miniature I saw. And I remember we were discussing this last week. I think it was Bretonians and Lizardmen. I think was the box I had.
That's right, we were talking
That
about
was
last week, weren't we?
Yeah, we're discussing last week together.
That was the 5th edition box set, that one.
Yeah, I think that's the one I saw first, and then I went to 40K a bit, and then I started realizing, you know, I found the other miniatures. I started reading history, I enjoyed it, and then I moved there from there. Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Jay? Being a younger fella, with which is often associated more with Warhammer and so on. How about what you like in terms of crossing genres, mixing them up in your collection or what have you?
Well, I started with the Warlord Games Waterloo starter set, and that's what I first started with. And I started on Victrix afterwards. And then in a few months later after that, I went to Belfast and I heard about the Warhammer shop there. And I went and saw the really nice guys there. And of course, it's the whole part of their strategy is that they're very nice to you, and then they convince you to buy about £50 worth of stuff that you really shouldn't have bought at all. What they do to everyone. You witnessed them do it in Belt. They're terrible. The stuff, they managed to convince you to buy something, and you just came in and didn't look. And they're always like, they bribe you almost. It's terrible. But I'm mainly just historicals. I only ever paint horse and musket era, or that Irish 9 Years' War stuff I do every now and again, because it's local history to me, because the Gannon's where it mainly was focused around, and that's just 10 over, and I can go to the museum there and just have a wee look at all their sort of history of it, really.
Okay. Cool. And last but not least, Anthony, how about your good self, sir?
Well, I started off with, when I actually started playing 40K, we're talking the first release of Rogue Trader.
Oh, gosh.
And that was actually before even Games Workshops were around. I think there was like the one in London, or there was one Games. Was it like 2 or 3 in the whole country before they started branching out really quite sort of countrywide?
Hammersmith was the first one in London. And
that's right, yeah. So basically, when I started, I was basically getting all my Warhammer stuff from like a local. I guess it was more of a sort of kind of like a craft store. That just happened to carry like Citadel miniatures, because obviously everything was like Citadel miniatures in those days.
Yeah.
And I remember picking up the box of Beaky Marines. That was like the first sort of box set that came out with the original Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my start into sort of set up Citadel miniatures, and I probably stayed with more of the sci-fi side rather than the sort of Warhammer. I've always wanted a Warhammer army. It was always too expensive for me, because obviously I was only sort of like a young teenager in those days. But I suppose the only sort of fantasy that I kind of went into was probably Blood Bowl around that sort of era. So when the very first Blood Bowl came out, I had when it was like the cardboard figures. I had like the very first edition.
My mate still got that set.
That's right. Yeah, I probably still got it somewhere. And the Judge Dredd board games that came out, like Block Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the role playing game, of course. But yeah, I was kind of just painting Citadel at that point, and again, there was like, even though later on I found out there were actually historical figures around, it never occurred to me to sort of start playing historicals. And when I actually sort of dropped out of the hobby, probably around the time when I went to sixth form college, probably. And I kind of never went back to it until many, many years later, into my sort of mid-30s. And I was quite interested in sort of like role playing around that sort of era. And I remember when I first got to university, I joined, ran down to the student union and joined like the student role playing society, the student union role playing society. I went to like the first meeting, and I've never met a bunch of more sad people in my entire life, and I basically never went back. It was absolutely terrible. So I should call it the anti-role playing club, because basically as soon as you go in there, you're just repulsed, and that kind of really put me off of the whole hobby, basically.
It's a shame.
And like I say, it wasn't until my mid-30s that I got back into it. And although the very first game that I got back into was actually Drop Fleet Commander, which I suppose would count as sci-fi, it wasn't very long before I started Flames of War, and then onto Bolt Action, and then I started a couple of years after that.
I've tried Flames of War. Visually, it looks okay to me, although I'm not. I love the tanks and vehicles at that scale.
That's right. Yeah, I never actually got a chance to play a decent game, because obviously I'm more of a sort of solo gamer. But I did really enjoy putting up the vehicles, and then I kind of went off of it. I went to Bolt Action, and I've actually still got a massive bunch in my mountain here. Yeah. So I mean, that was. So after that, I was kind of locked onto historicals, but I still dabble a lot into sort of science fiction. Like I played X-Wing, well, I still do. I've still got, but the version 1 rather than the version 2. And at one point I picked up Halo Fleet Battles.
Oh yeah,
which was done by, I think it was the same company that did Dystopian Wars. It's Spartan Games.
Yes.
And they kind of went bust, didn't they? Funnily enough, I've actually specifically looked out one of my boxes of Halo Fleet Battle ships, just to show you, because this particular box here has got the two mega ships, and I'll just quickly show you them. So these are like the biggest ships that were available. So this is the Covenant one. It's absolutely huge.
Oh, blimey, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And it's on like a 3-pronged stand. And then this is the equivalent for the UNSC. Yeah, absolutely humongous. But it's actually a really, really fun game to play. And at the time when I actually got into this, it was literally about a year before they closed down. So by the time I'd painted up the starter set and started buying some of the individual ships, then the company kind of closed, and of course then everything seemed to disappear. So I never really got a chance to properly fully explore the range of ships, which is a shame, because it's actually a really, really fun game. It's quite difficult to get into. I actually found a really good sort of how to play guide, which I always, whenever I go back to play it again, I always find that particular video on YouTube and just rewatch it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a really, really good fun game to play. And I imagine if you're playing with 2 people, it'd probably be a little bit more fun, because obviously it's there's a little bit of calculation to sort of work out how many dice each ship fires for its attack and defenses and stuff. And when you're playing both sides together, it's sometimes that can kind of slow you down a bit. But it is actually a really fun game to play, and the models are actually amazing. I think in this box I've got a couple of some of the ships that came in the starter set. So like this is the biggest of the Covenant ships that came in the starter set.
Quite tricky piece as well, isn't it?
And you can see within a sort of a base, you have different formations. So this I can't remember if this is an offensive or a defensive formation, but it's basically like a heavy cruiser, and it's got one of these light corvettes within the same sort of stand.
All right.
And then you have different formations, so you can have like offensive and defensive formations of ships, depending on the overlay that you use.
Fair enough.
And this is the UNSC sort of equivalent, the carrier, heavy carrier, is it heavy carrier or light carrier? Heavy carrier.
Oh, fair enough. Now I've had a couple of little intro games of X-Wing, which is a fabulous little game, but I just haven't got round to starting to play it again more often, which a couple of gaming friends of mine have threatened to show me to do, but I thought I'll wait till I A, can afford it, and B, finish painting what I've got in front of me at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's the good thing about X-Wing. You didn't need to paint it, did you?
Exactly, but it's still finding the time to do it or whatever. Very good, interesting game mechanics, but I've never tried Armada. I mean, what is there a great difference?
No, I've never tried Armada. I've always wanted to. To me, it's always looked quite difficult to play solo, which is one of the reasons why I never actually picked it up.
Fair dues. I mean, I look the models.
Yeah, the models are great. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but
I especially like the stands of fighters. I'm always I always remember a game that I used to play. It was do you remember Renegade Legion at all?
Rings a vague bell, but
yeah. Well, basically there was I think it was called Renegade Legion Leviathan. It was kind of like a capital ships version of Renegade Legion, and the models were actually like 3D cardboard boxes. So basically, they're flat packed in the box, and you just fold it up, tuck in the two ends, and it was like a 3D or semi 3D, as in it was a cube, and you had the different profiles of the ship on each of the sides of the rectangle. And that was an amazing game. And obviously I stopped playing it a long time ago, but that was part of the reason why because obviously I was playing X-Wing quite a lot, but that's obviously fighter based, isn't it? And and part of the reason why I went into Halo was because I wanted like a capital ships game. And like I say, luckily it's actually a really good game, and that's kind of how I got into it, really. So I'm not actually a big fan of the actual game, the computer game.
Is there a Star Trek based game? I'm sure.
Yes, it's very similar to X-Wing, I think.
I was going to say, I'm sure I vaguely remember it because there's a good friend of mine who's
I think it's called Attack Wing. I think
a self-confessed nerd, often looks at the stuff I've done and goes, it's interesting, but not quite my thing. And I think I'll tip over the edge if I wafted Star Trek in front of me and be like, whoa, I'm in. But yeah, I don't know. Really. Having said that, though, that sort of game is more, fighter dogfighting sort of based, isn't it? Really. So
that's right.
X-Wing is more a game that lends itself to that sort of gaming, really. It's I don't know. So anybody else got anything that's perhaps, when we're talking about crossing genres and so on, and we've all expressed our preferences in that regard, but anybody played anything that they would consider a bit more off the beaten track, either in terms of the subject matter or perhaps it's a bit of a niche interest, you don't see many people doing it, etc.?
That's an interesting question. Off the beaten track.
Well, like for example,
there are a few games out there.
Yeah, indeed. Sometimes you might hear appearance of, blimey, somebody wargames that period, and quite often you see things like Foundry, for example. They're always ones for like, hello, here's a wargames period you haven't thought of playing before. They're Darkest Africa, like Dr. Livingston, I presume, sort of games and things like that. Either a period of history that's a bit, either a period of history that's a bit niche, or I'm struggling to think of something here. In terms of, like, say, the scale of the models used, or the mechanics, or something like that. I mean,
I've got a weird game called it's called Home Raiders. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But it's basically, I got into it via a Kickstarter. And basically, the game itself, the miniatures are quite big. I think they're like 38 mil. So they're quite chunky. But the setting of it is, it's kind of set in real time. So, for instance, you could play a game on your painting table and use the stuff that's on your painting table as the terrain. Because the idea behind it is that these little creatures, or whatever faction you're playing, actually come through a little time rift into the world, and they like for instance, one of the clans are called the Gremlins, and they basically go around stealing things. So like they go around and steal your keys, for instance.
Ah, fair enough.
they're
That
like-
certainly is niche, isn't it?
And they steal bits out of it. Yeah, it's really weird little game, but it's really good fun. And the other, I think the other race that I've got is called the Lilliputians.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
from Lilliput, and they're
Yeah.
kind of like futuristic mega good guys, whose arch enemies are the Gremlins. And so basically, if you're playing a game, you could have like some kind of objective. Say, like for instance, I don't know, maybe you could have your pin vice, for instance, as the objective, and the Gremlins would start from one side of the table and try and nick your pin vice to take it back to their portal to take back to their world, and the Lilliputians will come in and try and stop them from nicking it. You know, it's really, and the weird thing about it is that you just play on whatever surface you want, you know, and use whatever cover is on that particular table. So, like for instance, a packet of biscuits could be used for cover, you know. And
good chance of a packet of biscuits still be left standing.
Pretty weird. Yeah, exactly.
No, I was going to say, a packet of biscuits being used for cover. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I did get this size with a lack of practice in that regard, I can tell you.
Steve's just put in the chat about medieval China.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
That could be quite an interesting period.
Yeah, is that Foundry? Just to use Foundry as an example again, they've got such a vast, wide range. I mean, and could you adapt another range models like Japanese models or what have you? Do you think? Or I don't know. Really, it's not.
I don't know. It's not something I really know much about.
Mongols or. I don't know.
Probably
there must
like
be actually
ancient Chinese.
One moment, caller.
Like, the sort of era
I know
that
there's lists
Mulan
for
was
it in here. Hang on, we'll go for it. There we go. Haha. There's a list for it in here. I think. Let's have a look. One moment, caller. Talk amongst yourselves. Where are we? No. Lots of old Middle Kingdom Egypt. Blah, blah, blah. Just play some funky on hold music here.
I suppose the other genre you could do would be, and I don't know which period this would be, and I'm probably going to show my ignorance here. But if you think about the ancients, where you've got like Wessex and
you've been watching Lost Kingdom again, haven't you?
Wow, you know, you've got me. Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
But you've got the whole Wessex and Northumbria,
Mercia.
I know. Us here down in Cornwall, I know we sort of fell out with. We just sort of kept ourselves to ourselves and pretty much went and fought for everybody, whoever sort of paid us, really.
And nobody paid you any attention until Poldark came along. So.
No, they didn't.
Yeah. That I mean, that whole Dark Ages, Saxons, Vikings, and then Normans, and so on. Like that's probably. If I was to sort of reboot my historical game life, I'd spend a lot of time on models for that. It's anyway. Where was I? I was looking for Chinese. I have here. There is Tang Chinese, Sung China. Sung China is sandwiched between Ayyubid Egyptians and Italo-Normans in this list.
Okay.
Tang China is in terms because it tends to be sort of chronological as you look through the contents page here. There we go. Tang China is between Bulgars and thematic Byzantines. All manner of.
I think
Han China.
Is that anything to do with China in your hand, Jay?
Oh no, nothing to do with fire telling.
Oh, that's my eyesight.
There's Ireland on it, actually.
I thought Jay had gone. And here's the medieval China wargaming book.
But no, this is hang on. The kin. God, there's so many. There's different. It seems like every half a dozen entries there's a different China. Kin China between Alexandrian Macedonians and Alexander's successors. Even earlier we have. Or was my eyesight deceiving me there? Every chance. I'm old. Yeah, there's quite a few. Han China between Ptolemaic and let's go Han China. Things you're talking about Han China. Let's see what sort of things in their list. because I wouldn't I wouldn't know where the models come from.
Imagine
but,
it would be the sort of same era as the Terracotta Warriors, wouldn't it?
yeah, that sort of thing.
China.
Well, here we are: Han Chinese, late 3rd century BC to early 3rd century AD. Is to cover the period this list covers. Han Dynasty, blah blah blah, corresponds in time to the rise and height of the Roman power in the west. Blah, blah, blah. Chinese archers, light cavalry, crossbows. So the entries in the list: you got heavy infantry with swords and spears and swords, medium infantry, spears and swords, light infantry, swordsmen, light infantry, archers, bows or crossbows, southern tribal medium infantry warbands, tribal light infantry, archers. So yeah, sort of bog standard type of infantry of that period, but it's the models with the particular dress, I suppose. So yeah, interesting. Wouldn't know where to go for models for it though.
I tell you another genre which could be quite interesting is Wild West.
Now that's quite popular. Dead Man's Hand is a game that quite a few people. I've never tried it, but it's
I've got 8 gangs just behind me. I haven't got around to painting them yet.
The what you call it? Closest I ever got to gaming that sort of era.
Got a couple as well.
Here's one he made earlier.
Hey, what's that, mate? Just so is it
Dead Man's Hand gangs?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Two have you got? Cavalry and Outlaws. I think I've got Cavalry.
Which is what I was going to say. The closest I've ever got to gaming that sort of era, I had some Dixon Miniatures Pony Wars figures. Just doing like small.
Bacchus have re-released that, haven't they? Pony Wars.
Yeah, they it was just an interesting little thing. Just basically, I wanted to do Custer's Last Stand. I had painted quite a few woodland Indians in my time, and so I just wanted to paint, Cochise and his mates and that sort of thing. There's a change, and a friend of mine had some 7th Cavalry as well, and I brought some. And I had a big, at the time, collection of 25mm Dixon's ACWs, and quite a fan of those models, so I brought some of but we basically had enough for a sort of kitchen table skirmish, and I forget the rules we used, but it was good fun. But it's the closest I ever got to gaming that sort of period, really. I used to having who was it? I think it was on the first of his broadcasts like this, Lee on Battle Bunker HQ, the first of his Sunday night ones, which, just to plug it, I'm going to be on his Sunday night one this weekend, actually. Just whoring myself out broadcast wise this weekend. I'm just a War Games tart, but
there's nothing wrong with being a War Games tart, though.
Absolutely nothing. If only he's got any War Games tart, I'll give you my address for delivery purposes. But the American Civil War, something I used to play a lot, and yet it's not something that's jumped up on my radar again for got to be approaching 20 years. I used to have I had a massive Dixon's collection, and sort of flogged it or traded it for something else, and I've never.
I think the very first historical miniatures I ever brought were some. Now I can't remember if they were 10mm or whether they're 15mm. American Civil War.
Pendragon do a nice range of 10 of the. 10
I can't remember the name of the company. They've probably gone out of business now, and we are talking a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I picked up a set of rules as well, and I can't remember what they're called now. It's kind of it's a dark blue softback book. I can't think of it. Is it Fire and Command or something like that?
Fire and Fury?
Possibly. And I know that Wars TV did a battle report using
I'm sure it's ACW. It's
Fire and Fury. It could be. Yeah. It probably is that, actually. Yeah.
I used to use Johnny Reb, which is similar in terms of the basing conventions things.
Jay's got what looks like a rule book in his hand, and I'm sure
it's an Osprey book.
Is it an Osprey book? Is it?
Yeah, it is in the Irish Wars. It was what the very obscure.
That's pretty obscure. Yeah.
Oh yes, we were talking.
I didn't even recognise the figures in your picture. I thought, well, I kind of recognise the sort of like the sort of conquistador style helmets, but there's no Tudor neck ruffles.
Okay, so my history radar has sort of has picked up. Jade, sort of tell us about the period. Tell us about the.
Indeed, yeah, because I mean, before we started digressing and waffling, we were talking about who's got an idea of a niche wargaming period and so on that we were going to say. So yeah, Jay, fire away, mate.
Well, I read a book and didn't finish it about 3 years ago on the Irish War, which is not really that 9 years. It's about nearly two decades almost. We're not going to talk about that because it's a little bit too much for this stream. But it's more or less just about whenever Ulster, the 9 provinces, 9 counties, sorry, which were 3 states at the time, all rose up in rebellion against the English because they sent a Lord President up there, and a load of feuds came out, a lot of treachery, and more or less the Spanish got involved. We're cutting a lot of corners here. And they had some.
So can I ask, why did the Spanish get involved? Is it
Catholic, was it, perhaps?
The Spanish Armada, after they wrecked off the coast of Donegal, there was a priest there, and he sought refuge with Hugh O'Neill, who worked then as an agent between Hugh O'Neill and the Spanish. And they sort of concocted a plan to overthrow Elizabeth I and make Ireland Catholic under Catholic rule again, as well as England, and make him the Spanish king of England. Just very far flung, and really makes the Irish only were there just to, I don't know what they're for money mainly. But anyway, we're not going to get into that. But they got loads of support from the Spanish, and all their troops were English trained because there was English officers in Tyrone, or whatever you want to call it, or Ulster, training Irish soldiers to fight for the English. And Hugh O'Neill disbanded his English troops, Irish troops, constantly, and replaced them. So he had a constant sort of force that was trained, that they were also getting disbanded so he could train more men, which no one questioned. And then he rose up in the rebellion after causing a proxy war in Fermanagh next to him. And then he double-crossed the English and the Scottish mercenaries, who he killed before betraying them. It's a really weird and strange way. It's honestly will melt your head because the book I read was confusing enough as it is, as well as the history. And more or less ended in Irish defeat, but the Irish wore red, which is the main thing about it. They wore red. The red coat, the first red coats, you could say.
Fair enough. I did like the sort of about rising up in rebellion against the English because I got Irish grandparents and things like that, and I support Ireland during the Six Nations rugby every season. But the comedian Darragh O'Brien, bold guy, he said I like to go around the world collecting obscure trivia about Ireland, and I discovered that we're crap at scuba diving. And it was just like titter of amusement amongst the audience. He says it's because we looked at the sea and thought it's cold and it's where the English came from. It made me laugh anyway. But that's interesting though, Jake. It also highlights one of the reasons I think sometimes people really get involved in a bit like Nick really loving his End of Year's War, like me talking about the Wars of the Roses and how fascinating I found that before he even started gaming it. And it's like you learn something, history. I mean, what Jay's just told us there, he's learnt through his interest in wargaming and found his period of history and all the backstory that goes beyond it, besides just painting some models and pointing them at each other across a wargames table.
And to be honest, that sounds very much. There's a lot of sort of espionage, double crossing. You've got some quite interesting. There must be some quite interesting personalities and characters in that uprising who you could bring into not only look at research, but you could sort of bring them to the gaming table, and you've got quite a good starter there for what could be quite an intriguing campaign. Especially if you did he had like sealed envelopes with like sealed, I don't know, different missions and double crossings, and at a club night you could run a campaign over a couple of weeks, and I think that'd be quite good fun to play, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's some actually that sort of Elizabethan era. I've noticed a few new rule sets and new model sets over the last couple of years. It's like it seems to be something that there's increasing amount of figures available for these days. I mean, how are you finding that, Jay?
Well, I use Timeline Miniatures. I use the Border Reavers range that they have because they have dedicated Irish units for their Border Reavers, which they're mainly all just Irish troops that would have been used by Hugh O'Neill. And they also have Kern units, which is something I really quite like because Kern are almost what this guy is here, like Irish levies almost, and they can only also be used as English mercenaries, Irish mercenaries in English service, because most of the English army were Irish mercenaries because they lost loads of their troops to attrition, and then they filled the books of Irish and pretended they were English. Anyway, this is a terrible book to use as a source anyway, because it's very outdated in its history and it's very biased in certain regards and makes no sense. And doesn't include any Irish sources, which is fair enough because it was
Book about Ireland wars that doesn't include any Irish sources.
Yeah, I know.
Why am I suddenly skeptical about the veracity of that particular work?
But that's again another interesting point, really. If you look at some of the battles and some of the wargaming periods that, for historical especially, how the author of the games, depending on their bias, could sway the troops.
The book I read on the period as well is also awfully biased as well, but that's neither here nor there. It was written by I see he's quite awfully biased, the man I read the book, and you can tell by his Facebook posts and the communities he's part of. He's very, very biased. So I should take what he writes in the book with a grain of salt most of the time. But he is always quite truthful in most regards until the last bit of this book where he went absolutely insane. But anyway.
See, I mean, there's a bias that even goes into sci-fi gaming, really, because if you think about some of the companies that provide sci-fi miniatures, they generally will go with the figures that sell the best. They very rarely will delve into background of something that is maybe on the fringes. So yeah, I mean, if you say Games Workshop, there's lots of lore on that about Space Marines, but not much about, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something I haven't really. The Dark Eldar, for example, there's not huge amounts of writing and bits and pieces about them, and there's a lot of sort of push towards those. So yeah,
and of course, everybody's going to be going squat mad now, aren't they?
No.
I've wished there's apparently a second book to I don't know if you've ever read it. Iron Eagle, I think it's called. It's about Imperial Guard fighter pilots.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. I've not read it, but
apparently there's a second book.
No, I've not seen that.
I've never actually seen it. And also it's not available on Audible either. But yeah, that's literally my favourite 40k book. Double Eagle, that's what they call it. Double Eagle, that's what it's called.
Fair dues.
It's an amazing book. I definitely recommend reading it if you get a chance.
So on a vague related note to our discussion before we start thinking about concluding what we're talking about this evening, on a vague related note to niche gaming periods and so on, well, two questions occur to me in terms of something to talk about. First of all, interesting gaming mechanics. Something that you've seen in one game that you might not see in your bog standard Yugo sort of game that you like and you think ought to be more diverse. And also another question: out of the games you played, in terms of the game system, which do you think would be the best that you could teach a beginner? What would you enjoy teaching somebody to play?
I think Black Powder is pretty easy to teach someone.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when I first, because obviously I play it solo, so when I was first learning, I found everything really simple apart from the hand-to-hand combat. That's sort of like the only element that I kind of struggled with.
I can see it being good for solo play, actually, to be fair. The first time I ever asked anybody that question, because it's a question I keep in my back pocket when I'm talking to gamers and what have you. Like I used to run a podcast years ago about it. But I asked a friend of mine who used to be a Games Workshop store employee, and that was just like he worked in a sort of a more generalized gaming store. And he said Kings of War, the Mantic game. He said almost before I finished asking him the question, that whoop came out. I've never tried it. Quite like some of the models.
No. I mean, to me, it kind of looks like a sort of a fantasy version of Black Powder. That's kind of the first thing that sort of jumped into my mind, because obviously the biggest thing that stands out is the way that they do casualties, don't they? The casualties are very similar to Black Powder in the fact that you don't actually remove units. The actual unit takes wounds. I can't remember.
Oh, look at that!
There you go.
And there's one he made earlier.
And here's one I made earlier.
Absolutely.
So
I like the models. I like the undead models. I'm not so keen on the elves. I had a look at them up close and personal once, and I got a free sample of a few bits and pieces years ago when I was running the podcast.
I mean, like I say, I don't play it, but I think if I was I'd probably go for Basilean. I quite like the Basileans.
Quite like the undead models, to be fair.
Mm.
The benefit,
ones are good.
What I like about this rule set is that Mantic are not precious.
Yeah.
They've said, you've got whatever figures you want to use, you crack on.
Yeah.
I did a, and I'll find it in a second. I did a, what's it called?
I know a lot of people use like Bretonians or an Empire as like the Empire of Man, don't they? Whatever it's called.
I had Forces of Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I went through the Reaper Games Bones miniatures.
Lovely models, the ones I've seen anyway.
And it was a project that stalled. But I had some of the Reaper Bones, mushrooms and trees and all sorts of bits and pieces for the Forces of Nature. Bear in mind, I got little people running behind. That's where I've got the camera running off. So. Oh, thank you. So I've been bought in a bit of cupcake, so that's a bit of a bonus.
Oh, very nice. Does she deliver?
She probably would. But she might be
just
a while
up the M5. Just up the M5.
Just up the M5. And it's something that I boxed up and put away for another day. But I also found with the Kings of War rule set is that basing is really nice as well, because you can really make. So you could put, I don't know, your regiment on one base.
Right.
So you haven't got to base each individual figure. So, for example, like in Warhammer Fantasy, you'd have a block of 20 archers, 20 halberdsmen, whatever.
Yeah. It used to be like 40, didn't it, back in the day?
What you could do with this is you could put, providing say, for example, you've got, I don't know, 80 by 80 base. For example, what you do is you'd put as many troops as you can on that base. So, for example, if you wanted to put, I don't know, 16, but have them maybe climbing over rocks or doing whatever you wanted them to do and make it very scenic, you could do that, but it would still class as 20 archers or 20 spearmen.
So it goes by the size of the base, not necessarily by the amount of models that are on it.
Not by the number of miniatures.
Because I've seen people do, they call them base blockers, don't they? Yeah. Where, like, for instance, if you have a block of 40 guys and you haven't quite got 40, so you had, I don't know, 36.
There's scenery in the middle.
And there'd be like a tree stump or something stuck in the middle that takes up the 40 by 40 slot.
Yeah. Because like I said, when I first asked somebody that question, which game would you find good to teach somebody, he said Kings of War. Now, so thinking purely from that point of view, then, John, if you were somebody rocked up and said, "Oh, that Kings of War, is that easy to learn?" How would you approach teaching somebody to play that game? Would you say, "Yeah, that's good"?
To be honest, I found the rule set a lot easier than playing Warhammer Fantasy. The rule set
not altogether uncommon.
That's not too hard, though, I would have thought.
No, but Kings of War is very much about getting some troops on the table, throwing a few dice, and having a bit of fun with it.
That's what Black Powder's all about for Napoleonics.
Yeah,
and so
and I really think that's and I think, to be honest, with Warlord, if you were to have 3 soldiers on a base, maybe a wounded guy, or one base, I don't think the rule set would fall out over it with you. I think they go, okay, so that base is I don't know, 6 deep or whatever it is, or six 40mm stands wide. Therefore, that counts as a regiment. And I don't think anyone would argue that if you made
it's all about frontage, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. So I think from that perspective, it's a good game to pick up. And what really did it for me is I could use whatever figures I wanted. There wasn't a prescription that said you have to use these figures, which it then opens up that whole imagination, and you can say, well, okay, so I want this and this. But from mechanics point of view, I would say Kings of War is an excellent game. And if Reggie, you end up watching this, I am available to to plug your games and paint your figures if you need them. But it's a good rule set. It's good.
What about you, Jay? Is there any of the games you play that you think, oh, I find it easy to teach somebody this, somebody who is interested in wargaming but has never actually rolled a dice in anger before?
I think really Rebels and Patriots, so when I would use for an introductory sort of thing.
No, that's a good idea.
There was like a wee Office Spirit game one of my mates made over in Belfast. It was for Napoleonics. It was based on Rebels and Patriots, Flags and Eagles. But it was a very easy rule set to learn. And if I ever had a friend, of which I haven't yet to ever look at any wargaming based thing, I would probably show them that. But they don't really want to because they think it's weird. But anyway,
it's the geek factor, isn't it, Jay? I'm with you on that. But a lot of my friends,
it's weird until they actually play the game, and then they'll actually quite enjoy it.
No, my friends think that I'm a geek.
Well, I know
I'm a solo player. I don't have any friends, so I'm fine.
I know Miller from Miller's Miniatures always says how, given he's in the construction trade, it's not the sort of thing. Oh, you can come down the pub. No, I'm going home to play my toy soldiers. It's not the sort of thing.
I think I'm kind of beyond that now. I mean,
I do give a shit.
When you're sort of like a teenager or at university or whatever. I mean, I suppose luckily I wasn't really that hardcore into it back when I was at university. But now I don't have any sort of embarrassment saying, oh, I always say I paint miniatures and wargame. And that's basically what I say.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm in IT and computers. IT computer bloke is nerd in other ways too. Shocker. But what the hell? But that's interesting. I looking at the various rule sets I've got on my shelf just up here. That's certainly Rebels and Patriots, as Jay's just said. It's certainly a game that I'd be quite happy to show somebody how it goes. It's quite a simple game. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other question I asked just now, before we wrap up, interesting game mechanics. Now, I'm going to kick off by saying I love the activation dice and bolt action.
Yeah, I think that's a classic one, isn't it?
You got a bag of 10 dice, and it's another red dice, you bastard. Go on, have another.
I mean, it's a little bit annoying when you first sort of get into it before when you first get your first army, and then you get the rule book and you look and you go, oh no, I need some sort of bag to put the dice in. And I need dice, and then you find out how expensive it.
What I like about that mechanic is it is purely random.
Yeah.
So going back to 40k, I go, you go. Now, if I've got a power force, I can wipe you off the table, and you don't even get a go of it.
A lot of people are saying about 9th edition at the moment that if you don't get that go first alpha strike, then you're fucked, basically.
But if you've got to pick a dice out of a bag, it really does randomize that process. And
I mean,
I was to say, even if your opponent was to go green dice, green dice, green dice, green dice, at some point that you're going to have the same number of grey dice to be able to counter strike.
Yeah,
and I think that as a mechanism is the word I'm looking for. I think is really good because it just really, I think it gives you that little bit of extra of suspense in the game, just as it would.
And there would be that randomness, isn't there? I mean, you're not going to get sort of fellas jumping off landing craft on Omaha Beach saying to the Germans at the top of the cliff of the machine guns, "Hang on, it's my go."
Yes.
Right, okay, carry on. Off you go, chaps.
Or you can imagine Wellington sort of turning around to his guys at Waterloo, going, "Right, guys, steady. The French are going to go first. We're going to have a bit of a hard first turn, but then when it's our go, stand by." And they'll go, "Yeah, okay, first turn. Yeah, well, it's not, is it?"
You get the artillery guys. Oh, sorry, sir, I've rolled a 6.
Yeah, I've rolled a 6. I've blown my cannon up.
But yeah, no, just. I mean, there's so many games. I mean, between us, we probably play quite a large amount of games. I mean, I'm very Warlord game centric. Hell Caesar, Bolt Action, Black Powder, plus me Age of Sigmar, and there's plenty of other games I have played in my time. Like my first coming as a war game, there was lots of 15 mil, like using stuff like DBA and DBM and things like that, and Ancients and Johnny Reb for ACW. But of the first thing that springs to mind, if somebody said to me about game mechanics, would be that. And then another interesting one is that to the strongest grid system. That's a different thing, isn't it?
Don't know that one myself, but
No, I'm just thinking up. Do tell, Simon. Do tell.
yeah.
Well, the rules. I think it was one of the early broadcasts we did of this. I think it might have even been the second or third one we did. It might be one that Nick hosted near the start of doing this, and we had the chap who wrote To the Strongest on here as a guest, and he was talking about. I've never played it. I've seen it being played, and I know people that are fans say, "Whoa, it's great," but it's basically it's a grid system, and the mats they sell to play on, I've got these grids on, and then like you've got your unit in that grid, and you've got a unit. You either have something in the grid in front of you or that.
So
side
it's a
or
bit
that
like Peter Pig. A lot of their games have hexagons, don't they? Yeah.
exactly, and it's like based with playing cards. So in terms of, don't ask me to explain the mechanics. All I know
That's
is
something that
that's what's in
I've
it.
never been keen on. Actually, I've never been keen on using playing cards as a tool in a game.
I played a Napoleonic skirmish game once that involved using a set of playing cards or parts of. That was interesting, but like I said, those are the I've never played To the Strongest. I'm only this is third-hand information at the best when I say about this grid system. So go ahead and Google it or have a look at a video on YouTube if you want.
All over it.
Exactly, or find the early episode of this. I think it's on Nick's channel.
I think I might have watched it actually.
Yeah.
I think
And
the
there's
first week I
Simon
was
Miller,
on.
his name was, I think, but the chap who
Yes, I think I've watched that one. Yeah.
but yeah, it's just I don't know the game myself, but then there's a couple of variants of it, like for King and Parliament or some what have you, for ECW. But it's different, and I like things that it's nice to sort of deviate from the norm and. I'm going to try this. It's different. Let's see if it works. And like compared to the Yugo Igo thing, that bolt action dice mechanic, that's the first thing I think of when somebody says, "What's a different game mechanic?"
I mean, if you think going a little bit sci-fi again, if you think back to X-Wing, I mean, X-Wing uses a similar sort of system, doesn't it? Where you put all your you work out your moves and then you put them all together in a bag and then you pick out one random, so you don't know if it's going to be the rebels or the Imperials that are going first because it goes by ship by ship, whichever one gets turned over first. That's sort of like a random ability, but I'd quite agree that definitely I think the bolt action dice is definitely something that's definitely very unique, and I think it's probably I think I read something
compared to other Warlord game systems. I mean, Hail Caesar and Black Powder are very similar, aren't they?
True.
In terms of the way they work, whereas bolt action's got its own little pussycat.
He just died them. He just literally just died them my legs.
I used to have a Sprocker Spaniel. Bless her. She died well before her time. Just long story, but anyway,
Mike died last year.
Exactly. It was 5-6 years ago now she died. But she'd be sat there, being all spanielish, mad as a hatter, basically. You just say pussycat, and she'd straight away. Whereas Mo, the dog I have now, who's half pug, half basset, I'm not certain she is a dog. I think she's a dog-shaped throw pillow. Seems to just lie on the settee, and that's her entire raison d'etre. Unless you get the cheese out of the fridge, and then she's there stood next to you like a shot, bless her. But anyway, I digress. So quickly before we finish off, what about you, Jay? You got any interesting game mechanics that you think, well, that's unusual? I quite like that.
I like the way you can charge tanks with infantry and bolt action. It's very mundane, but I was playing the game. I think it was a month ago. Actually, maybe 3 months ago. I don't know. But I had a Stug 3, and this man was playing British, and he had no anti-tank. So he just charged with bayonets into my Slug 3. It was an amazing thing to look at. It's very mundane. I just quite like that.
Now, that sort of thing, whilst on a brief tangent before we do wrap up, that every game has got a story they can tell about, I remember this moment in this game when I was playing, blah, blah, blah. Now, because I played a lot 40k before I came back to the historical fold, most of my gaming anecdotes are 40k related. Like you're saying about infantry charging a tank. I was back in the days of the 4th edition Eldar Codex. I was playing like an Ulthway Eldar army, and my sort of Seer Council and some and some the close combat Storm Guardians, the close combat Guardians danced across the table, shrugging off hits. Actually, it was just a Warlock and a team of the Storm Guardians rather than the Sea Accounts. That's it. Danced across the table, avoiding direct hits from a unit of Chaos Havocs and an Alpha Legion army. Some of the Guardians got whittled away. Got all the way right up into close combat and then died in close combat against this Chaos Havoc that twatted him with a missile launcher. But everyone's got a little fun little gaming anecdotes, isn't it? And that's
certainly have a lot of role playing memories from when I used to really heavily role play. I used to play about 4 or 5 different role playing games. Of which our favourite was Warhammer, the old school Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Do you remember the one?
Oh, yeah, good. Yeah,
that was an amazing game. And Judge Dredd, Twilight 2000, some of the Shadowrun.
Yeah.
And yeah, really good time in my life.
I did quite a bit of the Middle Earth role playing and Rollmaster when I was at uni years ago.
Yeah, I always remember I had this character because we were playing the big campaign. I can't remember what it was called. Was it something like Shadow over the Rhine or something like that? This massive campaign, which unfortunately I don't think we actually managed to finish in the end. We were playing it for years and years, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years. But I had this character called it was called Tony Ponderelli, and he started off being like a bodyguard. So his only weapons were this pair of knuckle dusters, and this sort of we're talking maybe 2 or 3 campaigns in, and he's actually he eventually became a witch hunter. But his favourite weapons always remain these 2 knuckle dusters, and I always remember this time where basically he came across this knight in full plate armor with this massive swan head on top of his helmet, and he was just standing there. And Tony Ponderelli waltzes up to him, and in one single hit, just breaks his neck and kills him while flattening in his helmet. So this giant great knight comes waltzing out, and then my guy just punches him in the face, concaves his helmet in, and kills him in one hit.
Like the opening scene, or one of the opening scenes in the last Jason Bourne movie, where there's that big price.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
One shots him, twats him down.
He's a great character.
I feel like a Bond villain now.
No, yeah. No, Mr. Foley, I expect you to die. Anyway, listen, chaps, we've been running for close on 2 hours now. We've exhausted our 2 original topics and a couple of meandering other chin wags as well. So, gents, I think we'll wrap it up there. Now, thank you very much for your company as usual.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay, for joining.
Yeah, nice to finally meet you, Jay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And do come again soon. So, with that being said, chaps, thanks for coming. I think it was especially the earlier part of the chat was a particularly interesting thing. The tool tips. I mean, brush soap. I'm taking that away.
Brush soap all over it, Jay.
Yeah, don't forget.
This episode sponsored by
B&J. B&J brush soap.
Right. Well, I'll end it there, chaps. And thank you for watching.
You won't forget.